And good evening. This is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents. It's always good to have a familiar friend to the room, to the show, Mr. Danny Thompson, Mr. NBA Full Court Press. I guess the key or number one Danette, all the above, NBAFCPRadio. You know him, you love him because you listen to him. He's all over the place. He's all over the web, all the above. And, Danny, it's great to have you back.
Ted, always a pleasure. Always have time for you. Thank you for the great intro.
Come on. You know, I could have done much, much better. I could sit back and say, hey, during the BSS days. But we're talking about the now. That's the past.
Exactly.
So it's great to have you on because we like to talk basketball. We know you're well versed in many sports, but it's like you've mastered basketball, the talk behind it, the business behind it. And I just had a few questions because there were some games that happened last Saturday night that not only almost broke the internet. I mean, Twitter was on fire. My 14-year-old daughter was screaming in the family room. And I came running in there from the office, and it was ABC, I don't even know. Is it their game of the week? It was the Thunder and the Warriors.
Mm-hmm. ABC Saturday Night Basketball.
Saturday Night Basketball. Something new that they're doing. They're looking at, maximizing that $2 billion or whatever, how many billions they're paying a year. I got to tell you, Steph Curry did, he's phenomenal. He's the greatest. I think I've joked with you and said, he's the greatest player ever, at least to the millennials and to this generation of basketball fans. But he hit this 38, 40-foot game-winning shot, and it seemed like everyone that used to play basketball that's a Hall of Famer, that's a top 50 player, went bonkers. It started with Big O, and then morphed to Isaiah Thomas, and then you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talking about it. Tell me, what's up with the divide? What's up with I don't even want to use the word hate, but why is there, a pause whether or not to give Steph Curry his due? I mean, he is great for the league now, for the way they play the league now, but why don't these, the players of yesteryear love him?
Well, you have to understand, nowadays, if you go back to, like I said, going back to the days of Oscar Robertson and those guys, Twitter wasn't around then. So when Oscar Robertson threw a triple-double up, which he almost did for an entire season, no one really knew about it. Okay, I saw it, I read it in my newspaper, but the second Russell Westbrook gets a triple-double, it's on the internet 10 seconds after he commits, the third part of the 10. Nowadays, you have to think Stephen Curry in one game makes what Oscar Robertson made an entire season. Things are completely different now than it was back a long time ago. So a lot of the older guys never had the publicity that these guys have now. Isaiah Thomas, they were in the 80s. Just think about if Twitter would have been around when Oscar Robertson adding a triple-double, or when you had Wilt Chamberlain putting up these insane numbers. If you had ESPN and you had all these different networks, NBA TV, TNT, all these different networks, all these different media outlets, all these different ways, Vines and Instagram videos and people taking 15-second clips of what goes on nowadays. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they didn't have those things. Now you have them, and at the click of a button, you could go on your phone and watch an entire basketball game from start to finish nowadays. Back in 1960, there was no such thing as a cell phone. So people had to go to games. People had to read articles. You had to somehow find your local newspaper to actually have it. Nowadays, you can find these things at the click of a button. So, of course, the exposure's out there everywhere, and nowadays, Steph Curry is the it guy in the NBA. And, there's not much you can really say bad about Steph Curry, because he's Steph Curry. There's not much more you can do about it.
That's true. Like I said, he's the greatest player ever to have played the game. We love him. We love the pregame, traditions that he's putting on. He's making fans come to the, when they travel, when they're the premier road team. Fans are getting to the stadium, their forums early, just so they can see Steph Curry, warm up and dribble the basketball. And I think it's great for the game of basketball. I got to ask you this. Take Steph Curry, put him in a time machine, and put him back to 1986, 87, playing against the Pistons with Joe Dumars and Rick Mahorn and all the above. Would he still be doing what he's doing today?
Well, I'll answer it two ways. Number one, you had mentioned the fact of, what Steph Curry is doing before pregame. Or I'm in Orlando, and they were actually here Thursday. And so I was here for, Steph Mania on Thursday. I wrote an article at NBAFCPRadio.com to talk about the pursuit of greatness. And be honest with you, there was 8,000 people there for warm-ups at 5:30, 5:45 before a 7 o'clock tip-off just to watch Stephen Curry shoot the basketball from 45, 50 feet, or doing his dribbling exhibitions or all these other things. All you saw was people out there left and right just watching him. I mean, you had even famous people. Jameis Winston was on the floor right next to me taking pictures and doing a video chat, I think, with his brother at courtside while Stephen Curry's warming up. You see Von Miller walking by. You see Gerald McCoy of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bryce Harper was here. Dick Vitale sitting courtside just in awe of Stephen Curry just shooting the basketball by itself. And he's shooting 40-foot shots, and they were going in like we shoot layups, Ted. But to answer your second question about would Stephen Curry do the same thing nowadays as in the 80s? Stephen Curry has a skill that very few people have in the history of the NBA, is that he can shoot the basketball. You can do these other things, but if you take anything about his game, he shoots the basketball and he shoots extremely well. Will he average 30 points a game back in the 80s? Probably not, but he would definitely be one of the better scorers in the NBA because of the fact that he shoots the basketball. He does a fundamental skill that very few people master in the NBA. He has mastered it. So I think he would do fine. The teams would be more physical with him. So I think the second he gets more physical, it would be a different story. But he can score. He'll get buckets, I'll tell you that, in the 80s. He will.
Danny, you hit up on a couple of great topics. I'm talking about the physicality of it, the fact that hand checking and everything else like that. And 20, 25, 30 years ago, if Steph is going, gorilla, and he's hitting shots from 30 feet and beyond, they're going to stick a person right on him before he crosses half court. It seems like, and I don't mean to sound like these retired players, but at what point does the coach, the coaches that are going against or dealing with this type of player say, hey, put a body on this guy. Put a couple of different defenders on him and check him immediately. Don't give him that, because it's anywhere on the court is lethal for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying, at some point, you look at today's coaches versus the coaches of yesteryear, they would have put a body on him. They would have played him physical. They would have been hand-checking him. And I'm not saying the great Steph Curry wouldn't be scoring what he's currently scoring now, but I'm just like, it's great for the Vines. It's great for social media and to see what he's doing, but you kind of think of, while you're at the game and you're wondering, what are these coaches thinking of?
Well, a lot, like I said, back in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, there was much more physicality. So, of course, the physicalness, for example, you play in the Pistons, Chuck Daly would have put a body on Steph Curry the entire time. You would have Joe Dumars and those guys just chasing Stephen Curry around. The real test of what Stephen Curry would do is how he would adjust to his game. From what we know, Stephen Curry is one of the highest basketball IQs there is in the NBA. So I'm sure that he'd be able to adjust to the physicality of it. Now, he would probably have to put on more muscle and probably have to put on more weight to him. I don't think he'll be 184, 185 pounds on that frame in the 80s. He would have to put on a little bit more weight. But I think with his basketball IQ, he would figure out ways to be able to get that shot off. It wouldn't be to like the level that he's doing now. but also at the same time, I wonder if a lot of these defenders, back in the 80s, can keep up with the ability of Stephen Curry's dribbling ability. Because Stephen Curry can take you right off the dribble with some of the best there is. Really the off the dribble came with Allen Iverson. That's where it really became, famous. Tim Hardaway had it, with UTEP two-step, but Allen Iverson made it an art form. He made it a mainstream thing. Stephen Curry he can handle the basketball to that level. So what I'm saying is that I think Curry's IQ would pick up, what the defense is giving him. And I still think he can score, but I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot more bumps and bruises than he gets right now. There might be a couple black eyes or something, but he will be a lot more bruised, but I think he'll figure it out, though. Gotcha.
And we're talking with Danny Thompson at NBA Full Court Press, NBA FCP Radio. You can hear him every Tuesday night, 6 to 8, Danny, 7 to 9, 6 to 8.
7 to 9 Eastern Time on 1080 The Team out here in Orlando, also on your TuneIn FM app. Also, if you want to see what I look like and me and Paul in the studio, you can check us out on livestream.com. It's a free registry. At the same time, you just type in Tuck and O'Neal, and you'll be able to see us on the live stream and live feed as well, too. So, stop by and say hi, and, just wave at us at the same time. We'll wave right back at you.
Gotcha. Danny, just one more follow-up question. It seems like there's a bad marriage going on out here in New York. I'm not talking about the marriage that's, with the Brooklyn Nets. I'm talking about the New York Knicks. Carmelo, the Knicks, Phil Jackson, James Dolan. I think it hit a new low last night with, the fans were, or a fan or two was, it was a home game in Madison Square Garden. A fan was heckling Melo. James Dolan was in attendance. And I guess the paying fan, stated, Melo, you suck. The Knicks suck. And Melo directed to the fan that, hey, if we suck so bad, tell the owner right there, tell Dolan that you want your refund. Now, as of this time, Melo has recanted that, and said, he should have held his cool. He shouldn't have said that to the fan. I mean, I thankfully, someone from his PR team has told him to make that statement. But is this the season in itself of being in New York? Do you think this off season, Melo's a goner? He's going to ask out? And what's your thoughts on Phil Jackson? Does he stay? Does he go? What happens? Because there's another opt-out for him in a year or so. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think Phil Jackson returns the Knicks next season. I think that the marriage is going to end. I think if they cannot land Kevin Durant this summer, I think he opts out. They're going to give it one more last run in free agency, I think, after Kevin Durant and Mike Conley, among other players. Look, Knicks fans have to realize there's one of two things. Carmelo Anthony is good for what he is, but he'll never be that type of player that's going to change your franchise. He's not that. He is what his idol was, which is Bernard King. He is a big-time scorer who, when healthy, is one of the most dangerous offensive players in the league, but he'll never elevate your team to that elite status. It just never has been instilled in him. It is what it is. Every player can't be Kobe Bryant. Not every player can be Dwayne Wade. Not every player can be at that level. I think the marriage between Carmelo Anthony and Knicks are also going to be coming to in very soon. Carmelo still has a couple of good years left. Why would you spend them on a team that's basically needing to rebuild? And the team's franchise player is now Kristaps Porzingis. So when you have Kristaps Porzingis as your guy going forward, the kid's only 19, 20 years old. That's not building for a team now. I think it's time for Melo and the Knicks, to part ways the same way they parted with Amari Stoudemire, and really it's time to start over.
And we're talking with Danny Thompson, NBA Full Court Press Radio. Danny, something came across my Twitter timeline about Baron Davis being picked up by the 76ers, the 87ers D-League team. I kind of thought this was all, just talk, idle talk. But is Baron Davis on his way to a comeback, or has his best days, has he seen his best days?
Baron says he still can go. Now, how much can he go? We'll see. That's why he's going to play with the 87ers. Look, it's just basically Baron Davis just trying to show the league he has one more shot left in him. He's still he was a quality player in the NBA for a while. The body gave away, and, just like it was. He was a guy with a humongous contract whose body could never live up to the contract. But when he was healthy, he was a very, very good player. Take away the years from New York, but look at the days when he was in Charlotte and New Orleans. Very talented player. Also look at the Clippers years. He was very talented. It's just that his body would never let him get it done. And it's the Delaware 87ers. He's not going to see an NBA roster anytime soon. And Delaware needs to replace Joe McRae scoring because he got called up to the Sixers. To the Cavs the other day. So I think Davis will be okay. I think it's a nice little publicity stunt, but I don't think he's going to make the NBA roster anytime soon.
Danny, I know you and I, along with a few of our other of our buddies a few years ago, we used to sit here and say, how do we fix? And we would throw in the various names of the major sports organizations, the sports leagues. How do we fix the NBA? Because right now, Clippers, Spurs, Warriors, Cavs, Toronto. If one of those 5 teams needs to be on their Saturday night, extravaganza show, but the NBA, that's only not even that's a small percentage of the teams. It seems like for me, being in the New York area, the Knicks are hard to watch. The Nets are even harder to watch. But how do we fix this league?
Well, you did forget Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City is 6.
Okay.
I think the way you fix the NBA right now, I think the NBA is going at a good place right now. I think the only difference is that if you can stop getting these guys, all these superstars, to play on the same team, that's the best way to stop the madness right now. But really, the NBA is at a very, very good place right now. I mean, if you look at the ratings from Saturday night, it was through the roof. And they're putting on some very, very good basketball. I wrote an article a long time ago saying, was this going to be a good idea? I thought it was a great idea. I just didn't like some of the matchups. It's playing right into the hands of ABC. Let's be honest. Every matchup they've had so far has had a dynamic storyline and a very, very good game afterwards. Their first game was Cleveland and Chicago. Chicago's not a bad team, but that was the first national appearance of Tyronn Lue right after David Blatt was escorted right after the door on Thursday. So Lue's first game was national TV on a Saturday night at home against the Chicago Bulls, your arch rival. ABC couldn't have planned it any better. Saturday, you had Golden State and Oklahoma City. Tremendous basketball game. We saw Steph Curry hit a 40-footer to win the game. If you look at the week before, when the Clippers and Golden State played, it was almost a blowout until the final 2 minutes of the game, where the Clippers erased a 13-point lead and really had a chance to tie the game before overtime. There really hasn't been that very many bad basketball games on ABC. So I think as far as the national market coverage is, once we start getting more superstars in different places, it's going to be good. Watch Minnesota in a couple years, I think a year or two, because Andrew Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns, they're going to make the franchise what it is. Chicago's always going to draw. Boston's getting better, and Boston's a team I think that's like second or third in the Eastern Conference, or fourth maybe. So they're on the rise for next season. They're going to be back on ABC next year. So you have Chicago, Boston. People are going to watch the Knicks regardless of how bad they are because it's Madison Square Garden. The same thing with the Lakers. If they're both on national TV, people are going to watch them just because they're fans of it. It is what it is. The Lakers and Knicks pack the buildings everywhere they go, no matter how bad they are. Even with the Lakers not having Kobe next year, they're going to still be better. You got Oklahoma City. You have San Antonio, who's always good. I think there's still some more teams on the rise. New Orleans is supposed to make that leap to that national status, but injuries killed their team the entire year. Houston hasn't been as good because of Harden and Howard not getting along. So you lost a couple of teams here and there, and I think as we're getting more guys to be better players, I think the league's in a better place right now. They signed a $2 billion contract for a reason. This league is actually coming up. Will it be the NFL? No, but it's better than any other professional league. So I think being a very, very solid number 2, I think is very good for Adam Silver. The way you improve this thing right now is you just improve the quality of the bad teams. Stop the tanking. Everybody get on a competitive level. Your elite teams are good. It's just now getting those bad teams to be mediocre and get the mediocre teams to be better. That's what it is. I think that's how you fix basketball. It's helping the lower to middle class teams out and getting some of those better players to sign with those teams. That's how you fix it.
This is starting to sound political, starting to sound like a presidential campaign. but
really, you know, we're going into basketball Armageddon next summer with the players, you know, with the potential lockout next summer.
Okay.
You know, and that's where I think a lot of things will be fixed. Now, the sad part is, if people know about who runs the Players Association, it's all the superstar players, your Chris Pauls, your LeBron James. Those are the guys who are in charge of the players union. That's great when you have names, but really, let's be honest, the cap goes to about $94, $95 million next season on 15 players. Most of the time, it's 13 guys on the roster, so basically the average players make around $6 to $7 million. Under the new CBA, essentially, these guys, these player reps, are trying to get what they call a supermax, which means one player can take up to 40% of the salary cap. There's your problem. That becomes a big problem. You know, 30 to 40% of your cap. If your cap's over $100 million, that means LeBron James can make $40 million a season.
Right.
Basically, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's what it's going to be about. Then it's going to be it's basically players going to the highest bidder. Right. And that's not going to help the lower teams who don't have the cap, or the teams that need the players, because nowadays everybody's about the guaranteed dollar. So until you get a better salary structure where, you know, you have one guy, kind of like the NFL, you have one guy at $1, and then you have a couple guys at this level, and every team can have the same guys at these different levels, that's how you fix it. So you have one player making $30 million a season, and then that's it. You don't have 4 and 5 guys making, you know, $20 million, and everybody else is filled with, you know, with bare minimum players. You spread those 4 or 5 guys out to 4 or 5 different teams. Basically, you put one player at one level, 2 or 3 players at this level, and then you start filling out your roster everywhere else. Then you'll start seeing a competitive shift in balance and a much better game that we're seeing now.
I remember this a couple of years ago. You and I were talking, and we were talking about the demise of mega contracts, these mega max contracts, and this went across multi, you know, leagues. It wasn't one specific league we were talking about. We talked about how the Super Friends would be the death of, you know, competitive sports, where you're like, hey, I just want to team up with you, and you know, I used to score 30 points a night and grab 15 rebounds, but I'm good with scoring 18. I think there's a problem with that. There's a huge problem with that, with the league, with the quality that we see out there. And, like, I mean, what you talked about earlier, the tanking, it's just there's certain things, it's sometimes, just sometimes, it's hard to watch. And I know for you, being in the Orlando area, I mean, and I know you have to say some favorable things because, you know, you're in that area and you're dealing with the Orlando Magic. I mean, what are your thoughts on that team as a whole, of what they've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years?
Well, Magic fans have to understand this. 3 years ago, this team was a playoff team. In the 2011-2012 season, this team was a playoff team. Then they traded Dwight Howard away, and then Ryan Anderson went away, and a lot of the guys that made the foundation of the Magic to be, you know, where they were went away, and they went on a rebuilding effort. You know, and people down here are restless. It's been 3 years, going on 4, and they're restless. You know, the natives are restless. They're trying to figure out what can they do to make the playoffs. You know, they want to burn the entire team down and start over. You know, lightning doesn't strike the ball very often. You know, there's very few times in the NBA where a team can have a major transition from one year to the next. A lot of times it's either a transitional Hall of Famer is drafted, like you look back in the 90s when David Robinson, you know, and then Asian Robinson was drafted to the Spurs, or then when Tim Duncan was drafted to the Spurs and they got David Robinson back from injury. You know, there's a lot of cases when, you know, people down here are just so upset that they want to fix this problem. You fix the problem right now because really you're not going to attract free agents here. Orlando has never had a good track record of attracting free agents. The last major free agent they signed was Grant Hill back in the early part of the 2000s, and they took a risk on a guy who had a serious injury. And, you know, they didn't get Duncan, they got McGrady. Outside of that, they traded for Steve Francis, they drafted Dwight Howard, and that's been it. So I think in Orlando's case down here, they want to win, but I'm worried that this summer they're going to spend every dollar they have on getting guys that are not going to transition their franchise and be essentially with a bunch of bad contracts in another 2 or 3 years. And where's that going to leave you? Maybe a 6 or a 7 in the playoffs every single year, getting blown out by Cleveland? No, thank you. But that's how Magic fans are. And, I'm not afraid to say that they're not in a good place right now, but they have some pretty decent pieces right now. They just have to be more patient. The fans do.
The final question, and I promise, is for some reason when I see the Cavaliers, and you see LeBron James and Irving and Kevin Love, something just doesn't seem right. You would think they would be, of course, the Warriors are the talk of the league. But you would think with those three hot shots on the team, we all know about the situation with Blatt, and now we have the situation, with Lou, and there could it be some, back and forth with Lou and Irving. But did something seem broken over there? What's your take on that?
I think it's already broken. Paul, one of our co-hosts, Paul Myers, mentioned on the show last night, if you look at Cleveland's roster, with the exception of last year, that roster has never done anything. Outside of LeBron James, look at that roster. What have they ever accomplished? With the exception of Richard Jefferson, what have they accomplished? Nothing. Kevin Love never won a playoff series. He's never been on a winning playoff series. Last year was his first year in the NBA playoffs. The same with Kyrie Irving. J.R. Smith, Amon Shumpert, what have these guys have ever done? Timothy Mozgov. Those guys have never really accomplished much of anything. And I think right now, what's setting Cleveland back, I think it's number 23. I think the fact of LeBron is the coach, the GM, he's the star player, he's pretty much everything in the organization right now. You have one man trying to control everything, and here's the problem. He won in Miami because Dwayne Wade was able to basically get in LeBron's face, say what he had to say, and keep LeBron in respect, and keep him in check. There's nobody in Cleveland that's going to do that. Not one player on that roster. The only player that could hold LeBron accountable was traded, and it was Varejao. And I don't know if he really had the ability to stand up to him. What Cleveland needs and what's going to hold them back is the fact that they don't have an alpha male to match LeBron James. That's what you need with LeBron James to win. People say, okay, what about Stephen Curry in Golden State? Why does he have another superstar player alpha male with him? Because Stephen Curry doesn't have an ego. Stephen Curry knows it's all about team. That team is built around Stephen Curry, and Stephen Curry makes the talents of everybody else better because of what he does on the court. LeBron James on the court is probably the most gifted player I have ever seen in my 33 years of watching almost 33 years of watching basketball. One of the most gifted players I've ever seen. The difference is that he doesn't elevate players in championship moments. Think about it. Look at all the years, take away Miami, that he's ever had a team where he's been the one guy. They got to the finals twice. He's not – it's like this. If he's never won a championship in Miami, we'd be talking about LeBron James in the same retrospect we talk about Carmelo Anthony they do in New York.
So does he or does he not get the ring in Cleveland?
No. I honestly think they have the best shot to make the finals in the East. Now I'm on the Toronto bandwagon right now. I wish they would have signed Joe Johnson. I wish they would have signed J.J. Hickson. I'm hoping they go out and get another forward, another big body to match Cleveland. If Cleveland should get to the finals, but no matter who they play in the finals, they will get obliterated in the finals. Even though you have LeBron James, you'll win a game or two in the finals, but you won't get anything past that. They don't match up well with Golden State. They don't match up well with San Antonio. They match up pretty well with the Clippers, but I don't think they really match up very well with Oklahoma City. So, no, I don't think they can win a playoff series against a Western Conference team, especially one of the elite teams in the finals.
The last statement I will make, the league has to fix contracts like Joe Johnson. When he got that max deal with the Hawks, I saw a huge problem with it because it was a player that had already hit his ceiling. And I think with the new contract that's about to happen, the new cable money, that's going to be the norm. That's going to be the norm, And that's another thing that causes that divide with the retired NBA player, a retired Hall of Famer, 50th greatest players, where you see less on the skill, and they're seeing 50 times the money. I think that's one of the problems, with the league, but that's something that they're not going to be able to fix. And there's going to be no player that's going to turn down a commitment of 5 years for $25 million a season, and, hey, I'm only scoring 11 points a game. And
is that really the player's fault, or is that the team's fault?
I think that's the league as a whole.
Well, you have to understand.
That falls under the umbrella of the league.
Well, Ted, that's not really the player's fault, Ted. It's like you being it's like you being employed by your employer now. If somebody wants to give you 4 times the money you're making right now to do the exact same job you're doing right now, knowing they know your background, are you going to turn it down? No.
But it's just the product for the fan to see this product out there, and you're seeing more and more. When you see Tristan Thompson being offered $80 million and him balking at it and sitting there and going back to the LeBron James management company or whomever on LeBron James' team that manages him to say, no, we want a little bit more. Look at it. That's just an example of just one person. And here's a guy who's, last that I know, he was coming off the bench.
Yes.
And he said no to $80 million.
Ted, the funny thing would have been was if he was not going to get a contract close to that. See, the thing is, the NBA is now run by the players. The players run the league right now. That's the problem. The owners, they cut the checks, but the players pretty much dictate what goes on. Owners have to pay for players' services. And so I think the only way you can probably fix it is that if you max out how much a guy can make. You put a player. If a player wants to give a guy 40% of his cap, let him do it. That's on them. They're the ones that have to deal with the backlash of the fans, and your product on the floor. Like I said, the way you fix this is that you stop allowing these teams to spend, X amount of dollars, and you have these 3 guys, like basically super friends like they did in Miami, all take, the same amount of money and then fill the roster with a whole bunch of players. Right. I think you have to go to a structure where, okay, 1 player can make this, you have 2 or 3 players who can make this, and then you have to figure out, everything else later on. That way, guys can figure out where they want to go. So, I think I'm a 40% player. Oh, I'm not going to take 20% money to go to this team. Let me go see if a team's going to pay me 40% of the money. Then you start seeing these superstars spread themselves out thin. Guarantee you won't have too many guys that will say, you know what, I'm going to leave $18 million a year on the table to go play with my friend. Then you start seeing who really is about the money, who really is about winning. There's your difference. Because, Ted, if I come to you and say, okay, listen, I know I'm making 40% of the salary cap. You got this team over here willing to offer you 40%, but will you come play on my team for 20%? That becomes your decision. Right. Are you going to leave 20? Are you going to leave half of what you're going to make on the table for the next 5 or 6 years? Or are you going to leave double the salary sitting right there? In most cases, you're not. In most cases, then you're going to be on your own team trying to figure out guys to help you get to the championship.
That's true.
There's your difference.
That's true.
What are the older players complaining about? They never had the financial flexibility to do what they want to as these players now. Players in the old school complain because really there was no free agency back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. There was no free agency. True. Guys were not making, $100 million back in the 80s. Isaiah Thomas probably never made $100 million total in the NBA as a player.
True.
This is the same league.
You look at the situation. Just look at the situation in New York. Look at the money Melo took, and you can see the level of frustration on his face. But no one told him to sign. No one told him to sign, but he didn't want to leave the money on the table. And you're right. And it's just a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to. Like I said, this year, with the cap going up, is going to be crazy because there's going to be a lot of guys making money that they shouldn't make it. I guarantee you right now we'll probably see 6 or 7 max deals this summer. In a lot of cases, these max deals will be $23 or $24 million a season. At any point in time, do you really think Mike Conley is worth a $24 million a year contract?
No.
Or is Nick Batum worth $23 million? Chandler Parsons worth over $25 million?
No.
But they're going to get that this summer.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I think you hit it on the head, because at the same time you look at Major League Baseball and you look at all these professional sports leagues, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening, because at the end of the day they're making $10 and $11 billion in revenue, and it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So
exactly.
I will say this much to you. I want to thank you for joining and coming on and spending some time with us. I know you promoted your show at the midpoint, but I want you to let all of our listeners know where can we find you. Let's go through the social media, because you're everywhere, and let's also close up with the station that you're on and where we can hear you.
Well, Ted, once again, thanks for taking the time out, and let us talk basketball for a few minutes on your show. It seems like longer than we get to do this all day long. But to reach me on social media is NBADT29 on Twitter. Our show is called Full Court Press Radio. It is on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9 Eastern Time on Sports Talk 1080, the team out here in Orlando. If you're not in Orlando, you can listen to our show nationwide on TuneInFM.com. Look under the word Sports Talk 1080. You can also check us out on SportsTalkFlorida.com. At 7 p.m., you'll see a live stream and feed of our show. Also, if you want to check our stream out, also go to livestream.com, register, which is free of charge, doesn't cost you anything, and type in Tuck and O'Neill, because that's the show that's on before us, and you'll be able to see our show from 7 to 9. Also, if you missed it, you can also do the same thing on live stream and watch our show till 3 p.m. Eastern Time on until Wednesdays. Instagram, Full Court Press Media. I'm always posting videos from the games I'm attending to all the time. Check us out on Facebook at Full Court Press Radio on Facebook, and check out me and the guys and the girls who write every single day on the NBA at www.NBAFCPRadio.com. I think that's everything.
All right, Danny, thanks so much.
Ted, thanks again for the time.